All righty. I wonder what you all are doing right about now. You're listening to us. And of course, if I look back to the backside here, I've got the TV going as well. And we're waiting for Donald Trump to announce his big announcement. Now, it can't be anything other than, he's running for president. But as always, we're here on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock. I'm retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Raul Reyes. I'm glad you're here. We may break away for a little bit just to watch him announce if we can do that. If not, you're going to be able to see that all day tomorrow, all day tonight, because the left is absolutely going crazy, bonkers. This is the one thing they didn't want. And but tonight I have a special guest. Let me tell you something. Uh, Luke Macias, who has his own podcast. If you haven't seen it yet, folks, you've got to get out there and check it out. Every time I want to catch up on what's going on with anything politics, especially the Texas legislative body. And by the way, they're going to be in session here early, I guess, January or so. And we're going to talk about that. But check out his podcast. What I want to do is just bring on my good friend, Luke Macias, because we want to talk all things politics, and we may break away for the Trump announcement. So here we go. Let's bring Luke. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Raul. Thanks for having me on, and I'm sure we'll get a few less viewers than President Trump's announcement, but we'll be a quick runner-up.
Well, listen, we're a hot commodity, you and me. Aside from Salcedo, who's that other guy? Who's the other Salcedo? By the way, he's drinking a little wine. I'm going to have myself a little water here. Hey, look, I mean, the political world is on fire tonight because Donald Trump is going to announce that he's running for president. And I want to get to that here toward the end. But right now, what I want to do is go out west. Luke, what happened in Arizona, man? I mean, we've got Don Huffines. We've got everybody out there helping Kari Lake. And they did that same thing where they drag it out. What's the inside? Do you have any scoop? Did they steal it? It looks like they stole it.
Yeah, so I was actually in Arizona all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Had just the pleasure of being with Kari Lake and a lot of her team members in the war room environment, trying to track these votes that were coming in, dealing with messaging, rapid response, all these different things. Look, there's going to be a time for kind of unwinding all that happened. Ultimately, there's a few more votes that are outstanding, but when they all are counted, it looks like at this point, Kari Lake will come between 10 and 15,000 votes away from the governorship of the millions cast. And so I think there's legitimately going to be kind of two sides of that can get talked about. One is there's confirmed real voter suppression that happened on election day. And so one of the things that Kari Lake's team had done in order to try to keep what they felt like was as much integrity in the election process as possible, they encouraged a lot of their voters to get out and vote on election day. And it looks like Katie Hobbs knew that. And so she could strategically slow down the election process on election day. And any delay that happened was mostly affecting Republican votes. You saw Democrats are becoming the party of early voting. Republicans are increasingly becoming election day voters. And so the problems that happened mainly in Maricopa County on election day absolutely disenfranchised thousands and thousands of voters. And
now is that video we see where they're trying to run that ballot? And there's numerous ways to suppress the vote. That's one of them, right? I mean, I don't know how they got that video, but if you've seen it, this person is trying to run his ballot and they're not able to. It says, put it over in box 3 and we're going to count it later on tonight. And it turned out after they went to go check it, guess what? It wasn't counted. So those are the little shenanigans that happen. And of course, you heard Donald Trump when he was in Robstown, no more early voting. So all patriots went to go vote on Tuesday. Right. I don't think he realized, none of us realize how they're going to do that, but it looks like you're right.
That's absolutely one of the contributing factors. And so that is a confirmed thing. The other thing you have is that the McCain establishment still exists in Arizona. And you have seen by the treasurer's votes and other things like that, you definitely see a significant amount of McCain loyalists basically voting Republican in legislative races, Republican in congressional races, Republican for the treasurer, Republican for the education guy who was not aligned with Kari Lake, and then breaking and voting for Democrat power in the governor's mansion, attorney general's seat, secretary of state. So that is a clear revelation. Now that in itself too, I just want to point out to a lot of people, like, that is not necessarily, that's not cheating. That's just the reality of the game that also exists. These rhinos, when we call them rhinos, Republicans in name only, they've
Yeah.
truly been unmasked over the last several years in our party, and in different sectors, right? There are still a lot in there, as Raul knows, but there's a lot of them that have been amassed, and the McCain machine in Arizona is one of those areas where these people have now gone full blown to say, I will vote for Democrat control of my state before giving it to a conservative. And so conservatives for a long time, will oppose somebody in the primary, but ultimately they still get the votes in November. Conservatives do not want to give Democrats control. Moderates will gladly give Democrats control. And so you do see a legitimate break from these McCain fake Republicans that voted Republican anywhere they thought it was a more moderate establishment person, and then crossed over and cast Democrat ballots for governor.
Well,
And
talk
so,
talk about revenge from the grave, and may he rest in peace. But his daughter just, I mean, literally has been out there. You're right. So, I wonder how that works, and we can get into that later. But do these people have like an inner connection? They all have their own social media? Because, that happens around here in San Antonio. It seems like we got a momentum, and then all of a sudden on Tuesday night, this overwhelming, and you're right, before we go out there and accuse everybody of cheating, they're using the system to their advantage.
mm,
And I'm not sure that conservatives do that. We do what we're supposed to do, Luke. We're good people. We run over, we vote. Here lately everybody wants to
yep,
vote on Tuesday, and
yep,
guess what, the opponent actually figured out how to counter that, and that's
yep,
what happened out there with Carrie Lake. She's such a wonderful candidate. I mean, and the first thing she said she was going to do was declare an
yep,
invasion. And I called it here. I said, if she wins and declares an invasion, it's lights out for a guy named Greg Abbott, because
yep.
he literally did that today. And so let's go over to Greg Abbott now, because I'm going to put the picture up here. He's literally, what's driving this? I mean, was he just waiting to wait? I mean, Carrie Lake had to lose, so he's gonna, and of course Donald Trump is doing the I'm going to run for president. Which one of those is it? Both? What are you seeing here?
So first and foremost, I think it's really good to actually acknowledge what he did in a good way, and then really what's lacking in how he announced it. So I think it's important to start with explaining the fact that what Greg Abbott did today is not what Carrie Lake would have done if she was elected governor of Arizona. If she was elected governor of Arizona, she would have declared an invasion. We are being invaded.
Yep.
And the US Constitution gives us the ability to repel the invasion, right? And so what Abbott did today is he kind of pointed back to some things he had done later, I guess earlier in the year, and said, hey, guess what? I am declaring an invasion. And he used all of the words that we would use to describe an
Yeah.
invasion. And then he said, here's the things I'm going to do. And you have them up here on the screen.
Yep.
The unfortunate absence in this declaration of an invasion decree announcement is
Is
that he's taking illegals and he's taking them back to the border, he says. But the reality is what that means is they're taking illegals and they're giving them to Border Patrol. They're giving them to ICE at the ports of entry, and then they're being processed and they're being taken into our country. And so,
well, in
though he
fact,
has,
and in fact, let me put this one up here because it addresses that specifically. Here's Ken Cuccinelli. I've got him up here.
yep,
It says, I appreciate ad Governor Abbott, but this is invasion comments today are just the comments, unless Texas puts invaders back into Mexico. And somebody commented when I put this up on my social media, said, and they were correct. So like, wait a minute, he's taking them back to the border. And when he did that the last time with
yes,
Operation Lone Star, and then it came out with another executive order, we are all learning, Luke, that you have to look at what's not there, because taking people back to the border, and I had a lot of friends who just blowing up with anger, going, if you take them back to the border and give them to DHS, it's ultimately a delayed catch and release anyway, because most people are going to get processed and tossed into the U.S. He's of course putting them on a bus to go, I don't know, Chicago, Philadelphia, some of these different places now. So, and if you look at Cuccinelli, he just fried him today. He just says, look, it's the same thing as Operation Lone Star, which by the way I think is $4 billion spent. We may be at $5 billion, but the end result is the same. Nothing is going to happen here. And so um, I get criticized Greg the primaries, and I kept telling folks, I'm gonna go vote for him. Nobody wants Beto, but we got to hold every one of our Republicans accountable. And so,
yep,
so you're seeing the difference. I mean, the base, which is made up of great people that went to the state convention that actually
mm,
booed booed John Cornyn, if you were there, like for
Yep.
20 minutes. I I always say this. He walks in with his wife. There was absolutely zero mercy that he was
Yep.
holding his wife there. And this is the base as we talked about this before we came on. You said people are awake. They're now seeing the rhinos, the Republicans in name only. We got to blame a guy like Trump, and I don't mean that in a bad way. He literally was the light bulb that sort of started pointing at people, like you said earlier, John McCain, Liz
Mhm.
Cheney, our own guy down here in South Texas, Tony Gonzalez, the Anthony Gonzalez in Ohio, and on and on and on. So when I see this from Greg Abbott, what's he doing here? What's your take on why now declare an invasion? I mean, look, I'm glad he did it, but this has no teeth, as Ken Cuccinelli is referencing here. What do you see?
Well, first of all, he got a tremendous amount of praise, mostly for the most part, from the right on social media. So if you look at most Republican commentators, you saw him today,
Yeah,
Raul. A lot of people just saying this is amazing. This is exactly what we want. The reality is that as people like Ken Cuccinelli, I'd recommend people listen to Texans for Strong Borders, which had a presence at the convention. They put out a statement today as well that I thought was really well crafted and explained, hey, not saying this is a bad thing, but also this isn't doing what all of us have asked him to do. And
yeah,
so one, I think it kind of focuses on the importance to make sure you're plugged into Center for Renewing America, Texans for Strong Borders, the Raul Reyes Show, these type of programs that are giving you this information, right? So, look, it at least lays the groundwork. What we've won, one of my just political mentors says the most important battle is what the battle's about. Okay, so
yeah,
where have conservatives won? We won that you can declare an invasion. What Greg Abbott did today was say, Article 1, Section 10, I can declare an invasion and I can do things about it. Okay.
yeah.
Now, we disagree. The list of things that he's doing about it, they're not actually solving the problem. But he
Nope.
did declare an invasion and say, I can declare an invasion, I can do something. Now we just need to fight to make sure that the policies enacted are those policies that the legislature forces votes, even though they don't want to oppose the governor. If
Yeah.
we get a vote on the Senate floor or the House floor on the type of policies that we want to see that we know will end the invasion, I do think that the governor will be forced further. So, unfortunately, as you said, this is a huge loss for Carrie Lake's loss, because if she had been victorious, we would not, honestly, we wouldn't even be dealing with this. She'd declare an invasion, Abbott would fall in line, and that would be taken care of. But the Lord has other plans. And so we've got to figure out what those are.
Yeah, listen, and let's go here for a second. It seems like after Kerry Lake lost, just more people are disheartened with the election process. And look, Arizona's got to take care of Arizona, but even
Mhm.
here, and I'm going to skip over here for a second, but I think it was yesterday, Andrew Murr submitted a bill to bring back the felony penalties to that bill. Remember, it was lowered by Steve Allison and he gavelled it in, and there's a few other folks. Either way, we did not have felony penalties on the original voter bill last legislative session. I think, if you ask me, look, these folks, they're always just trying to throw crumbs and morsels at us. I think it's all part of us not asking for, guess what? Same day voting, one ballot, one paper ballot, and let's all do it on Tuesday, because I think that's what's next. In fact, I would say that after Arizona, those people are going to start to push to end early voting. And I think that's happening across America. I mean, especially here in Texas, everybody seems to think that we're doing okay. And the end result is not really, because we have a lot of fake Republicans. I call them squishy Republicans,
Mhm.
because they have no backbone. And in the House and in the Senate, now, mind you, here's the problem. They always tend to have more money, and I don't know, it's because their moderates or liberal friends provide it to them, and I think that's it. And so we, the conservatives, a guy like me, we can beat our opponent, but then something happens in the middle of the night, and we don't end up being congressmen or senators or whatever the case may be. And people they're losing, I guess, the appetite to go challenge. I mean, I would think rhinos are okay with that, and Democrats are as well. But you and I know we're always going to keep fighting. We're going to encourage people to do that. But doesn't this put a dagger into? I mean, just like it's the final stab to people who are saying, I'm done voting. Nothing is going to change. Carrie Lake proves it. She was better than Hobbs. Hobbs wouldn't even debate. Nobody is debating now. And I read this great article, and I'll let you say something here in a minute. It's not about going out to get votes. It's about how many ballots you can get into the system, because that's really what the Democrats are good at. And so back to you. I mean, is this the final dagger? I've got a lot of friends that are just cursing up a storm the election
Mm.
process. What do we say to those
So
folks?
I think it's really important to recognize that Texas and Florida are two of the anomalies that got more red on election night, right?
Yeah.
So Texas has had an average of 6 to 8% Republican domination statewide for the last 3 election cycles.
Yep.
Donald Trump beat Joe Biden by 6.6% in Texas. Our statewide average on election night in Texas was 11%. Okay, so we took what has historically for the last 6 years been 6 to 8 points, depending on what type of Republican you are on the ballot. And
Yep.
everybody averaged 11%, which meant that people like Sid Miller and Glenn Hager were at 13%, while a couple people were closer to 10. That's a huge victory. Now in Florida, I always tell people, even when Texas does well, it seems like Florida figures out a way to one up us. But Donald Trump won Florida by 3%, which was historic. People said, oh my gosh, Florida might be actually going red. This place wasn't even in question. It wasn't down to 1%. He's moved in a direction. And Ron DeSantis comes along, actually scares all the liberals out of the state for the most part, allows people who want
Out of
freedom to move
Miami.
in,
Out of Miami, looks like.
out of Miami. And now all of a sudden he wins by 20 points. So
Yeah.
you have a 17-point growth. So what do we learn from those two things? Not only was there political migration, conservative-minded people moving in, and there was liberal fleeing, more so in Florida than in Texas. Liberals actually fleeing. I think they actually feel less safe in Florida than they do in Texas, unfortunately. So we need to change that regarding our environment.
We
But
need
then
to make it a
last,
little more scary here. That's for
but,
sure. Yeah.
but we passed election integrity. Now, we didn't pass everything we wanted, not
Right.
everything you wanted, not everything I wanted, but way better than Arizona and Nevada's system.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Laxalt got as close as he did in the U.S. Senate race in Nevada because they mailed a ballot to every single registered voter. And you probably get just as upset as I do when everyone says, oh, this is a democracy. And we have to remind them that we're not
Yeah.
actually a democracy. We're a
don't get me started.
representative republic. And so
Yeah.
what do we believe? We believe that any Texas citizen can register and it's not hard. And then we
Yeah.
think every single one of those people can vote. And that's not hard either. That's our system. Now, what the left has figured out is that we can create a system that takes all of these citizens that they never vote. They haven't voted in years. They
Yeah.
are part of a funnel. And the machine of the Democrat Party in Pennsylvania, Nevada, and all these other states, Michigan, have cemented a machine that can churn out hundreds of thousands of votes. It doesn't matter whether your Democrat candidate can complete sentences. It doesn't matter whether in Arizona, even the
Yeah.
local establishment media is saying Katie Hobbs is wrong for not debating, right? So
yeah.
with the people that actually go in and cast a vote, Carrie Lake wins by a long shot. People voted for Oz over Fetterman. But guess what? There is a machine that can funnel hundreds of thousands of votes. And if you're a red state in America, you have to stop it. So the good news is in Texas, we make it much harder. You can't vote by mail if you're not over 65. We basically made it illegal to have ballot harvesting, which has been legal in Texas prior. So I think that even those cogs in the Democrat machine caused us to gain that advantage along with some other factors. Now, to your point, is like, we need to take this further. We need to recognize that this isn't an election season. I just think the more we get into this whole thing, people are voting 30 days out from an election. That should never happen. People should never have their votes cast 30 days out from an election. Here's the window that you get to vote. Come in, cast your ballot, move on, move out. And so I hope the conservatives move on.
I think the 2 weeks that we do for early voting ought to be, because they do prep 2 or 3 weeks out from that 2 weeks anyway. So heck, just take all month, prepare for a one day, get more precinct polls, whatever has to happen. The resources are there if we really want to make it happen, and everybody can bona fidely vote on one day. Heck, make it a holiday so there's no griping about I've got to go work and figure out how to do this. But you're right. I think the left has figured out how to collect ballots, and again, and some of that is not cheating. You're right. Some of that is bona fide. Now they use the laws and they're using them to their advantage a whole lot better than conservatives. uh, I think we're going to have to start throwing down just like them, or else we're just going to keep losing the battle against liberal and the left, of course. But look, all that said, I don't know what happens to Carrie Lake next. It's got to be something good because she was just a phenomenal speaker, leader,
She's a
very
huge asset.
enthusiastic. Yeah, and I didn't know you were in Arizona, but that's you got to see her and from watching her on TV, boy, she's amazing. She's like another female Trump, I think. And Arizona lost big, of course, a couple of days ago. Look, let's go over now to the Senate. I want to throw this picture up here as Trump is throwing down Mitch McConnell. Um, we didn't win. Actually, we were supposed to be 51, maybe 52 in the Senate at the
Mhm.
federal level. Looks like that's not going to happen. What's your take on this? I mean, McConnell just sort of botched it. Looks like today his lieutenant came out and said, "Look, it's my fault. I guess he's taking the dagger or something." What I mean, what the heck happened here?
No, ultimately, Mitch McConnell did everything he could to get as many rhinos to win their Senate elections. And this is one of the things we should all be grateful to Donald Trump for doing. He went into these Senate elections and actually got engaged early on
Yeah.
and actually like made sure that the more conservative candidate won. And because of that, we have Ted Budd in North Carolina, who is a House Freedom Caucus member, now a U.S. senator from a state that has two very moderate Republicans. And then you had J.D. Vance in Ohio, way more conservative than
Yeah.
Rob Portman. So some of the even gains we've seen within the Republican caucus happened because of Donald Trump. And he also made sure that conservatives like Adam Laxalt, Blake Masters were victorious in their seats. Well, this ticked Mitch McConnell off. And so basically what he did was, following those election victories, he decided to hoard a lot of his cash, not spend it to actually ensure a Republican majority. He went up to Alaska, spent $9 million against the Republican nominee, the nominee elected by the Republicans to be their Republican U.S.
Or
senator.
Lisa Murkowski, who's just almost a Democrat, Luke.
I mean, look, we hardly have the Supreme Court we have that overturned Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Is in no thanks to Lisa Murkowski. And that's worth recognizing. Like,
Well,
okay,
yes.
think about this for a second.
She gave a very eloquent speech. I remember this.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
You just go, wait a second. You can't even count on this woman when you really need her. But you know what? That's not true. Mitch McConnell can count on her when he needs her to vote for him. Right.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what he decided to do. He decided to spend his money on protecting his fiefdom, not on giving Republicans the majority. It's the same thing that all the establishment rhinos did in Arizona. They didn't care to have a majority in Arizona. They didn't care if they lost the governorship. They want control.
Yeah.
Right. Conservatives have to never back down. I mean, honestly, looking back, I'm glad Carrie Lake ran. And even if she lost, got less votes, I'd back her again in 4 years. And if somebody said, no, we should go for some more moderate person, so absolutely not. The second you give in to these rhinos and let them control the process, they not only will win, but they will then take that power and abuse it and refuse to do what they're constitutionally obligated to do.
And no defense.
So, we can't let it happen.
Yeah, no defense for McConnell, but in this year though, there was something like 20 or 22 Senate seats that were Republican that we had to defend, where Democrats were really defending something like 6 or 7. So again, I'm not defending what McConnell did. He should have put the money where it needed to be, or at least they have to be able to look into the crystal ball and realize where strategically they've got to apply this money. And of course, I think he just ticked off by Donald Trump and went and did whatever he wants to anyway. But for folks who don't understand that, it's every 2 years you have a third of the Senate that sort of is in flux. This year we had more Senate seats that had to be defended by Republicans. So it looks bad. Now, in 24 though, it's the opposite. Democrats are defending something like 22 or 23 seats, where we're just have to hold on to 8. So now we can go on the offense. Now, Donald Trump is going to run for president. Just a mega opportunity to do something in 24 in the Senate. Now, does McConnell survive? Is he? I don't know if they voted today. Is he going to be the leader of the Senate? I mean, how does this work?
I think he is going to be the leader of the Senate. That's actually a good thing to kind of break down. It's interesting. If McConnell, this is another point of why he didn't want the majority.
Right.
If McConnell had a 51 Republican Senate, he would right now be out of a job. He wouldn't be able to be in the majority.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
In order to be the majority leader, he needs 51. And there are 2, 3, 4, 5 senators who would never vote for him. Right. But now that he's in the minority, he just needs a majority of the caucus, which he has. So he announced today, look, I have the votes. We're going to vote. But I'm grateful for the people. So Rick Scott has stepped up and said, I'm going to challenge him. And Rick Scott, let's say if McConnell is an F-, Rick Scott is a C+. Okay. He's more conservative. He's more outsider. He's more independent. He pushes actual Republican ideas. He's tried to be more aggressive on the policy front than
Yeah.
McConnell has. And he went in and fought hard for these conservatives in Arizona, Nevada, all these states where McConnell was pulling back. He was going in from day one and saying, we're going to fight hard for our nominees. So I appreciate that from Rick Scott, way better than McConnell. He's announced that he's running. Marco Rubio has basically signaled he does not support McConnell. Ted Cruz, thank God, came out, and I'm very grateful. I'll recognize
John
that from
Cornyn,
Senator
Cornyn
Cruz.
and all this.
John Cornyn will be a rubber stamp for McConnell from day one, every day and twice on Sundays. And so,
we got to get the guy out of here.
Yeah. But we're going to have opposition against McConnell for the first time in 15 years. And these are some things that I think conservatives need to at least look at and be hopeful about, right? There is legitimate opposition against Kevin McCarthy right now. He does not have the votes to become speaker. That's a great win. McConnell has never dealt with opposition within the caucus. He has multiple Republican senators saying, I'm not voting for this guy. This is where conservatives are actually gaining prominence in the party. And we can't stop. We can't slow down. To your point, we can take the majority in 2024. It is a great map for Republicans in comparison to this last election. Yeah. So we do need to work hard to make sure they are conservatives on the ballot, that they all are reaping the benefits of that big wave that will be created with a lot of momentum in 2024. And then second of all, if we've set the stage, McConnell will know if these people are against me, even if we win these 4 or 5 states, I don't have a job. So I think you could really see McConnell just kind of realize that he's basically on a 2-year, he's got 2 years left of being in the role he's in, and then he's out. And so this is why it's still an important battle against McConnell, even though he will maintain his position as minority leader.
Well, and you made a great point, and I want to re-emphasize it for everybody who's watching. Look, this is the long game. We didn't get everything we needed this year, but it sets it up for 24. And I think because of Donald Trump not being president, there's a whole lot of people that are surfacing, not just, as representatives or senators, but the mama bears have just come out like crazy. School districts and the school boards. So as we round the corner to 24, this is not the time to pull back, is what I'm hearing you say, Luke. And I agree. We need to just keep pushing forward and right, because McConnell now knows, look, you're on your way out, Bubba. It's over. And you get to hang out for a couple more years. Let's move over to the House, because it's a great transition to McCarthy here. Today they met. Looks like he had 180 plus votes. The crazy part to me, Luke, and a lot of folks, is that we still have the House in the balance. I mean, really, we haven't really reached that 218 unless it happened. I don't think so. There's
it happened about an hour and a half ago.
Okay, great.
California finally. So we literally have 218 confirmed, potentially 3 or 4 more is what I think. But I think
and the hero, for anybody who doesn't realize, the crazy part is California brought in more Republicans, and so did New York. Lee Zeldin out there, Luke, was absolutely amazing. 100%. And he looks like he dragged 4 or 5 of these representatives, and they've gone Republican in New York.
100%. And I'm sure you saw this, Raul, but Texas could have given the U.S. Congress 3 more Republicans, and we only gave them 2. They basically decided in redistricting in Texas to just give themselves 2 more seats.
Don't even get me started.
You watched it. And so all of a sudden, all these incumbents draw themselves 60% districts, and then they give us 2 more Republican seats instead of 3 solid red seats we could have sent. So that's an unfortunate thing for Texas. To your point, thank God, New York is the one who delivered us the majority. Lee Zeldin got so many Republicans to vote that even though he fell short, he flipped 4 seats. And California, people forget there's more Republicans in California than there are Texas. It's just such a big state. And so thank God, California and New York save us the majority and actually
quick segue down to the South here. We had 2 out of the 3 lost, and of course Monica de la Cruz won. What I've got my opinions about what happened, and what are your thoughts? Did they even have a chance? Because if I look at Myra Flores, when she jumped into the new district, right, at 34, it was plus 17 Biden. And, this whole Hispanic, let's just call it the red wave. But since we're going to South Texas for a second here, and I don't like the identity politics, but the Hispanic red wave did not materialize, Luke. We've been saying that on this show from day one. We could say it's candidate quality, except for Cassie Garcia is pretty conservative. I mean, she worked for Ted Cruz. Now, I've got a video where I think it's Alex Stein the comedian is chasing down Myra Flores because she voted for amnesty. But was it a setup? I always thought that Myra won, and I thought it was wonderful. I didn't think she had a chance in the new district because it
General.
was but both Democrats and Republicans just fundraised the heck out of that. And of course, Abbott reaped the rewards because if you look at the map, and this is for everybody, if you were to look at the map when Beto ran against Ted Cruz, every county came in to a certain degree for Beto. If I'm a strategist and I know you're a consultant, I would look at Abbott and go, run south and make sure that you weaken anything that Beto can do down in the south. And guess where he was at for the last 6 months? Down there, coddling the Hispanic vote, working with Myra, Monica, and everybody else. Look, it's just politics, folks. We're just providing the facts here. But
Yep.
what happened to the other two? Was it just the district is too Democrat? And we did it to ourselves. I mean, we redistrict that whole place, and we
That's
could
right.
have had two more Republicans in this Hispanic red wave, and it did not happen. What are your thoughts?
So I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the Hispanic red wave didn't happen in Texas. It's really important. Monica de la Cruz did actually quite well. And everybody said, oh, she outperformed Trump in this district. And then when you dug
Yeah,
into it, it was actually the rural white counties that were the north side of her district that got even more red than they were under Trump. And that also happened for the rest of the Republican ticket, as we talked about statewide, going from 6 to 11%.
yeah,
So her bump wasn't a bump in South Texas. Okay. Myra Flores is the only one who I think you can credibly say made major inroads with Hispanic voters.
yeah,
Okay. I mean, the truth is Beto O'Rourke won Hidalgo County by a greater margin than the Republican average in 2020. Right.
yeah,
So he won Hidalgo by greater than what the Republicans, on average Democrats on average got in 2020. There wasn't this massive move in South Texas. Now, credit Republicans. I think they were smart to go down there and fight them because, to your point, it kept Democrats really concerned with the Valley. They had to go down and fight for territory that they
yeah,
normally always have. But we didn't actually change many hearts and minds. Who did? Well, Myra Flores actually outperformed most everyone else in the Valley by
yeah,
7-8%. She was in a plus 15 Biden district, as you pointed out, and she actually lost by what? 8, I think, at the end of the day.
yeah,
And so that is a legitimate move. Cassie Garcia did not see that at the same time. Some of that was also, honestly, Henry Cuellar benefited from the fact that he was challenged by the socialists. They spent millions of dollars calling him a conservative. They
yeah.
tried to beat him. They
That's the
almost beat
Justice.
him.
That's the Justice Democrat group that brought in
Yes.
AOC and
Yeah.
Ilma.
AOC and all these leftists called Henry Cuellar a conservative. So then after they spent a couple $1,000,000,
Yeah,
almost beat him, he goes into a general. When Cassie Garcia starts telling the whole Rio Grande Valley he's a Nancy Pelosi liberal, nobody really believed her because they had just been
yeah,
told by the left he's not left enough. So it really
yeah. He's
positioned
pro-life.
Henry Cuellar
He's
well.
pro-life, and he's pro-life as well.
That's right.
So, which I never
He's for
understood.
school choice. Yeah, no, it's been very. Now, I will say he's pro-life, but then he also voted for the latest pro-abortion bill, and that was to save his career, right? If he
Yeah,
hadn't voted for
the
Pelosi's
inside
bill.
scoop that we got on Myra was that people really did like her, and especially because she's originally from Mexico, so she
Yep,
had this connection with
yep,
people down there who could see that one of their own had been become an American citizen. And by the way, this is a good thing. This is the American dream. She's out there punching away,
yep.
but at the end of the day, Democrats I think are going to keep the Democrat that has been around the longest because he's got more connections. And it seems like they just happen to survive for what the reason I tell people there's a whole mess of Democrats along the border, even after Ronald Reagan, even after Trump, and they voted for Trump in large numbers, but still kept their Democrat congressman, is because they don't connect to Nancy Pelosi. Everything is local to the Valley, and they look at Nancy, they think she's crazy and nuts. But they look at Henry, and as long as Henry's producing and he's doing what
Mm-hmm.
he says he's going to do, they're not going to trade him out for another conservative like Cassie Garcia. She's too new. She doesn't have the connections. And oh, by the way, the Cuellar family is a pretty powerful family down in South
Yep.
Texas to begin with, which is why a lot of Republicans go down there to visit. I mean, this is just
Mm-hmm.
part of the nature of the beast. And so uh, I think the Hispanic red wave, you're right, did not materialize for a lot of different reasons. You could say candidate quality is one of them, but at the end of the day, the district was just matched against these ladies. Monica de la Cruz, I guess her opponent was a newbie Democrat as well, right? It's not like Vela was not around. So Vicente Vela is gone.
And also, Democrats pulled out of that district. They
Yeah,
stopped spending weeks out because they knew it wasn't going their way. So there was a lot that she benefited from. Ultimately, though, in the South Texas counties, Monica de la Cruz did not do better than the rest of the ticket. And I think that's kind of the important thing to realize is that Dan Patrick outperformed Greg Abbott in some of those Rio Grande Valley areas,
yeah,
even after Greg Abbott went down there and spent all that money. And so uh, it's important to recognize the wave did not happen in South Texas as Republicans had hoped. Doesn't mean that Democrats didn't have to spend a lot more money than they normally spent down there. It's a good thing.
right.
But we didn't make inroads. Donald Trump made us inroads in 2020. We saw a massive wave happen. And basically, if anything, maybe what Republicans did was they solidified all those Trump converts into the GOP. So these people that moved 2 years ago have kind of cemented themselves as, yes, I'm now actually a Republican voter. That is an
Yeah.
actual gain from 2018, but not from 2020. So that's what we have.
Well, here's the predicament, and we'll move on here in a second. But here's the concern I have for South Texas. I think there is a lot of walkaway Democrats from because they're starting to see the socialist communist portion, and Cuellar and Gonzalez can no longer contain that. Now they won great. I mean, I'm not great, but they won for whatever reason. But what I was, they're actually looking at Republicans and going, wait, you want me to vote for someone like Liz Cheney? And then of course you look at Abbott. I'm a critic of Abbott because, as we've discussed earlier, he's declared an invasion a day late, a dollar short, and it really there has no teeth on it. Those folks down there are living every day the invasion, and
Yep.
so they look at Abbott and I don't know that they came out. You're right. Dan Patrick outperformed him because I think it's for that very reason. So there's a lot of intricacies that I'm leaving out here. But at the end of the day, it did not materialize. I'd be very curious, and we're going to mark this date because we're going to have this conversation 2 years from now when Trump comes back. I'm very curious to see if it happens then one more time. And do they convert the congressional seats to Republicans? I think that's a far-fetched idea, but it might happen. We'll see. And this is why we like talking about politics. So,
Yep.
okay. Let's talk about your favorite subject, Dade Phelan. I
Yep.
mean, so what I keep. Let me put this picture out here. So if nobody knows, Dade Phelan here is the Speaker of the House, and I guess he's going to be the Speaker of the House again. Did they vote for that again? For those folks who don't know, he was the Speaker of the House before. Did this get voted on again, or he automatically assumes the position one more time?
Yeah, so Dade Phelan was elected. He bypassed the Republican caucus process that was created to get rid of Joe Strauss and effectively did. This is the rule that says that Republicans get to choose their speaker so that we can stop empowering Democrats with so much power that they use to kill Republican legislation. And so there was this caucus process that was created. Dade Phelan bypassed that at 2 years ago, literally almost 2 years ago today. The day after the election, he came out and said, the speaker's race is over. And he released a list. And that list included quite a few Republicans and also Democrats. Democrats teamed up with him to help him get the 76 votes he needed to become speaker. And that's what he did. And then he turned around and gave Democrats a ton of chairmanships, pensions, and investments, which
Yeah.
that's going to oversee the ESG legislation, the woke corporations that we fund with all our pension money, public education. We talk about passing a DeSantis style bill in Florida that says you can't talk to a third grader or a second grader about sexual, identity. And that's going to go before a very liberal Democrat who voted in favor of partial birth abortion, right? He chairs the public education committee. I don't think so. And so Dade Phelan gave all this power to Democrats. And then, of course, we had our session that we had. Now, we still got some really good conservative legislation out of last session with the abortion ban, the heartbeat bill, constitutional carry. But this came with a ton of pressure from the outside, right? The Texas House is not automatically set up to usher in conservative legislation. You have to fight tooth and nail because it is opposing you for the most part. So we go into this session with Dan Patrick having basically said he's going to move most Republican priorities. I think that's what most people have heard him say. Any conversations I've had with Republican senators, they've said, hey, we're told we're going to move a lot of the Republican priorities through. There might be some that don't move through, and we need to put pressure on the Senate to make sure they deliver those victories.
Right.
But when you talk to Republicans in the Texas House, most of them don't feel comfortable that any of the priorities are going to get voted on in the House floor. And one of the biggest priorities that they will vote on day 2, January 12th, will be a ban on Democrat chairs, which is led by Representative Brian Slayton out of East Texas, probably our most conservative leader in the House.
Yeah.
And so he's going to lead his fight again to ban Democrat chairman, which 81% of Republican voters literally voted to do in March. So let me tell you about the speaker's race.
Okay, go ahead.
Dade Phelan, there will be a caucus meeting in December.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, Dade Phelan's allies want the caucus vote to be binding and end the race. And the reason they want to do that is because Tony Tinderholt is challenging Dade Phelan for speaker. Right. And so their hope is that enough of them would vote against Tony Tinderholt so that none of them have to vote on the first day of session. Technically, at the beginning of session, just a little bit of history, there is no speaker. The Secretary of State actually is the acting speaker at the beginning of the legislative session. So the Secretary of State literally is the chamber president, the Speaker of the House, and then he literally reads a script and says, are there any nominations for speaker? So there's a speaker today because Dade Phelan is the speaker through the interim. And on the first day of session, reset. And so the Secretary of State's there. There will be nominations given. At this point, it looks like there will be nominations of both Dade Phelan and Tony Tinderholt. Tony Tinderholt is literally one of the 5 most conservative state representatives in the state of Texas. He has been a conservative leader in the House since 2014 when he got elected. He beat a rhino incumbent Republican who was fake out of Arlington, ran against her as a grassroots candidate, defeated her, has been a consistent conservative, and is now running for Speaker of the House. He voted to ban Democrat chairs. The speaker candidates can't say whether they will or won't appoint anybody. That's like a felony. And so Tony hasn't said that. But we all know that he's voted to ban Democrat chairs in the past, and that he has said that Republican priorities should always be voted on the House floor. And so now Republican legislators have to go to Austin and make a choice. Are you going to have a speaker that supports Republican priorities and isn't going to give Democrats all this power? Or are you going to have a speaker that gave Democrats power, that killed Republican priorities, that then refused to even punish Democrats when they came back after fleeing DC? Yeah. So I think that there is a very clear choice, and every Republican's going to have to make that choice. And so I'm grateful that Tony Tinderholt has stepped up. I'm also grateful that he didn't let them manipulate the process and try to use the caucus rules now against him to keep a transparent vote on the Texas House. So
this has got to be a tactic. And I love it, by the way, because this literally puts my representative on the line. I get to see who he voted for. So if he votes for Dade Phelan, who gave him a lot of money, by the way, we're talking about Andrew Murr down here.
Mm-hmm.
Then 2 years from now, because really this is where you start. Well, we need to hold them accountable during the legislative body. Everybody needs to do that. But at least we know, look, you're with them or you're with us, and you're right, you really can't say as the future speaker or as a candidate for speaker that you're going to do certain things. It is breaking the law. Most people don't know that, by the way. And so, but you're right, based on records and assumptions, conservative, spectrum ratings or whatever, you would know that Tinderholt's going to probably not do that anyway. Now, here's the question I have. At the Republican convention, this was the number 1 or number 2 priority for the entire base. If it happens again, there's going to be a total meltdown, I think. Now we're going to move on. We're all going to get through the legislative body session, but this cannot be good. I mean, I've said from 4 or 5 years ago, actually since Donald Trump took over, at the federal levels, there's been a civil war between the rhinos and the conservatives, but now it's down here in Texas. And again, I go back to, if I see John Cornyn get booed with his wife, by all means, the base did not hold back. I mean, for 10, 12 minutes, they went at him. And so now back to Phelan, is there a remedy here? Is there something that can happen? Because if he gets enough Democrats to vote for him, it's lights out. He's going to be,
and every Democrat will vote for him, right? So every Democrat will vote for him. Yeah. He literally only needs 20 some odd Republicans. And so that's what sets us up to fail from the beginning. But I think here's the important things that I'm looking at. One, the reason the vote for speaker is so important is that many of these state representatives would love for there not to be any contest. That way they don't own the actions of the speaker, right? They could say, look, The speaker is who the speaker is. He did
Yeah.
things I don't like. I'm not him, right? When they have to vote for him on the first day of session, now when he kills all these Republican priorities, they have owned that. They've supported it, right?
Yeah.
Andrew Murr filed a bill you mentioned to put the felony back in for voter fraud. Okay.
Right.
To put that's a good bill. That's a bill that Republicans
Yeah.
want to see done. Now, here's the thing. That bill was pushed out of the Senate last time. And it died in the House because Dade Phelan didn't want to pass it.
And it's
Right?
going to get killed again. I bet it gets killed again because this is all set up. Look, Dade Phelan donated to, and by the way, this happens. We're not just picking on Andrew Murr here.
Yep.
It's everybody.
All these Republicans.
That's right, all of them. And it's a setup from day one. They toss all these conservative, great bills, but they already know they're going to get crushed or killed at the very end. We're lucky that we got constitutional carry. And it's more like a permitless carry, actually, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, it's a win's a win.
Yes.
But we can't get, gender modification of our children is still there. CRT has been a law that has no teeth for a long, long time.
Yep.
And look at the border. I mean, I guess the point here is
there's so many things. Let me give you two kind of hopeful things. So I'm looking for a couple things. One is when Brian Slayton offered a ban on Democrat chairs last session, it got 5 votes. 5 Republicans out of 83 voted to ban Democrat chairman. Okay, that's a abysmally low number. I don't know. I don't think it's going to pass. If I were to bet, I would not bet on it passing because it literally needs 76 Republicans. But I will tell you this, it's going to be a lot more than 5. And that is going to be a testimony to the grassroots. If the grassroots just said, oh my gosh, 5 votes, this is pathetic, I'm going home, it would get another 5 votes this time. You're going to see it significantly higher. Why? Because grassroots Republicans said, no, that's not okay. That's not acceptable. You're going to see that number quadruple, 5-tuple. I think it will be between 20 and 30 is just my prediction. And so I think that that's going to be a huge win for conservatives. I think what's going to happen with the speaker's election, that in the event that Dade is reelected, all of these Republicans are now going to have fallen on their sword for him. And they had to pick him over a conservative. So they're going to go to him and say, look, you have to give me this bill. You don't understand. That bill you were going to kill, you can't kill it. And I saw this happen with Strauss, and we're going to see this happen with Dade Phelan. You're going to see more Republican legislation out of the House that comes out because Dade has to give these people something. They just voted for him, and then he voted to put all these Democrats in power. He put all these Democrats in chairmanships, and then they're going to basically go to him and say, I'm going to be roasted by my grassroots at home if you don't give me some wins. And then they're going to come up with some conservative wins, right? It's not going to be everything we need. We're going to keep fighting. But the more pressure we put on this session, the more we're going to get, right? And that's what conservatives have to remember is that the environment's going to be ripe, that I believe what you're going to see, more than likely, you're going to see Dan Patrick move a decent amount of Republican priorities out of the Senate pretty quickly. And then they're going to sit there in the House. And the House the pressure is going to go higher and higher and higher. And the more the grassroots push, the more they're going to get, right? So the speaker's race is incredibly important. I think it's important that grassroots Texans from all across the state communicate with their state reps and tell them, I don't want Democrat chairman. I don't want business as usual. I want my Republican priorities voted on. Y'all vote on thousands of bills. Hundreds of bills get votes on the House floor. I just want these 8 to get voted on and then vote however many you want on.
There's only
it's 8.
8, Luke.
Get to the 8 and then get to all the other stuff you want to do.
Then
right?
do the other 1,000. Right, exactly.
So that's all we're asking for. It's actually not that hard. But these people, fundamentally, most of these politicians, they despise their voters. They do. Okay, not all of them. And then a big chunk of them, this is what you have a lot of in the House. People who, if you and I sit down with, and we're just, let's say, grabbing a beer or a water or whatever else you want, your beverage of choice, sitting down having a conversation, you would find they agree with us 85, 90% of the time. Okay. Oh, I like that. I wish we did that. Blah, blah, blah. But then when they get to that building and they're told, don't do that, it's going to tick everybody off. Or if you push that issue, you're going to be punished. Or if you keep talking about that thing that all the people at your district want you to talk about, like, you're not going to get to ever be a chairman. You're not going to get to be on the appropriations committee and help write the budget. All of a sudden, that pressure, it's an environment that rewards the wrong behavior. So these people that if you and I are alone with, if they were got to wave their hand, they go, let's pass that bill. But they don't have the courage to fight in the middle of it, right?
Well, let me tell you one thing I have noticed, and the Tenderholt, popping out there, it can go the other way because Dade Phelan could tell the people that voted for him to go to hell
Mhm.
and just make sacrificial lambs out of all of them, and then we're right back to square one. None of the legislative conservative priorities will get passed. Now, let's hope it's somewhere in the middle, and there's enough pressure for Dade to do something that gets us enough conservative bills across the line. And but you know, what I would tell you is I'm seeing a little more of when I see that with Tinderholt coming out to run for speaker, it feels like somebody's actually strategically trying to do something. Like there's a tactic here to get the rhinos out into the open. You know what I mean? Because a lot of them pretend they're all conservative. Andrew Murr, certain one of them, but I mean, this is how he won his last election. He's running around, I did all these wonderful things. He knows these bills were dead on arrival anyway. And by the way, just because Andrew Murr happens to be part of my district here. Other than that, we could talk about a whole bunch of other representatives out there that do the same dang thing. So tactically, because I'm a strategist, I like what I'm seeing. So is this a Matt Rinaldi thing, or is there some? I mean, is the base finally getting smart and pushing on certain things? Because I think Tenderholt popping out is actually a phenomenally good idea. Because I don't last time around it didn't happen for whatever reason.
Mhm.
You explained it, but now somebody got smart, and it's sort of this checkmate that we're going to not get till maybe 2 years from now, but at least
Mhm.
we'll know who the rhinos are, who's with who, and who's not with us. I mean, somebody planning this, and I don't give it up if don't give up the ghost, if you know what I mean. But
Yep.
surely this is good strategy and tactics. Somebody's working this, yes.
I think there's a great coalition of conservatives that have really started to build in Texas over the last 2 years since last session. So conservatives have been united at different times, right? The 2015 session was definitely a huge conservative coalition in the
Yep.
Senate, in the House. We got a lot done that session. And those factions have split up and come back together at different times. I think you're seeing conservatives uniting. I think your point with the party is well taken in the idea that we have a more strategic, more aggressive conservative party than I think ever before. The
Yeah.
SREC is more conservative significantly. I did a episode on that on my podcast about right after the convention. Like our SREC is now a super majority controlled by very conservative Republican activists. And
Yeah.
we have a incredibly not only conservative but strategic chairman who has pushed the party to the right in an
Yeah.
aggressive
Matt
way.
Rinaldi's phenomenal. I really like him.
So I think you have that component, and then you have last session in the Texas House in particular. You had a situation where Brian Slayton was fighting on the regular, and then you had let's say 10 to 15 other state reps that would fight one day a week, sometimes 2 days a week. And so you'd have these different coalitions form on different issues at different times. But
Yeah.
there wasn't a concerted, continual effort put forth. There
Yeah.
wasn't
Brian
a
looked like he was on his
coalition,
own half the time. You know what I mean?
and it looked like it for a lot of
Yeah.
people from the outside, and it probably felt like it if you were him on the House floor
Yeah.
sometimes. But other members were fighting. They just weren't fighting as much. And I think that some of that also had to do the honeymoon period with Dade Phelan. You have this new speaker that shows up and everybody goes, well, maybe he's
Maybe.
going to be good. Right.
Yeah.
And then by the time you
Nope.
realize he's really not good, it's like, oh, I'm already in this mode. And
Wrong.
so we start this session, I think, with a handful of conservatives that are saying, no, I'm fighting today,
Yeah.
tomorrow, the next day, and we're going to make this happen. So I think you're right that we should be more excited that you have more organized grassroots activists, you have more organized, much more organized party, you have more organized efforts in the legislature, right? A couple politicians that are saying, no, we're going to fight every day and twice on Sundays. And then so it seems like we have a much better coalition going into this. I 100% believe we have a way better coalition going into this session than we had 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, we did get some conservative policy we needed and a lot we didn't. So
Yeah.
we get to try to push as much of that over the finish line this time
No, and
around.
that's terrific because look, I'm all about winning and I'm all about getting rid of these people that get in the way of making and keeping Texas red because Lord knows I'm seeing a whole lot of blue across the spectrum. People can pretend they're conservative and Republican,
Mhm.
and they're not. The elected Republicans in Texas, a good chunk of them are not conservative. They're out there. And by the way, being a former colonel in the military, I know
Mhm.
what power looks like. So some of these is
Mhm.
none of this is a racist thing. None of this is if some crazy bunk. No, it is men and women that want to be in power, and this is how they acquire it. So we got to go out there and take it. Look, we got about 4.5, 5 minutes.
Yep.
Let's give me your assessment. Trump, DeSantis, they're pitting them together? Is DeSantis going to get in there? Because I'll give you my quick 10
Yeah,
second
go ahead.
version of is Trump is just going to crush everything like he did before. Ted Cruz was strong. A lot. Marco Rubio was strong. He turned these folks into caricatures
Mm-hmm.
because that's what Donald Trump does.
Does.
I'm praying DeSantis stays out till 28. But what are you seeing here? 3 minutes, go.
So, first and foremost, we should be really grateful that we're in a Republican Party where it's pretty much DeSantis or Trump and nobody else,
Yep.
right? That is a huge win for conservatives. There is not an establishment, moderate, schmucky person who stands a chance. Mike Pence has more of the vote than Rick Scott, Nikki
Mitt
Haley,
Romney,
all
like a
these
Mitt
other fake
Romney.
Republicans. Well, I don't even think Mitt Romney would have 0.5%. But Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, and Mike Pence. Those are the four establishment preferences for president, right? But what do you have happening right now? Right now, you have quite a few of those establishment forces actually saying, well, I'd settle for DeSantis, right? I'd settle for literally the most conservative governor in the nation. And that's how much they hate Donald Trump. So that doesn't make them good, but it does mean that their choice, their only choice, because of how, let's say in some areas, especially at the top of the ticket, the base is way more sophisticated than they ever have been, right? So they don't necessarily see it at the state rep level, the state senate level, the county commissioner level, but they see it at the presidential level. I want either Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. There's no other options for the base. Those are the two biggest conservative fighters we have in our party right now. So huge win for conservatives that they've created that environment. Now the question is what's going to happen. Personally, I think that if Tuesday night had gone better and Donald Trump had more momentum, I don't think there was any chance that Ron DeSantis was going to get in. I think he would only get in. I've always said that I only thought he was going to get in if Trump made a strategic error and stumbled. Now, we have seen some stumbling, and I think it's not just the election night stuff. So the election night stuff happens. I don't blame Trump for that. I think there's a lot of people that get blamed for that. Trump might be a small part of it. All of these people have contributing factors to us not doing well on election night. Okay, that's understandable. There is a difference, though. In 2015 and 2016, Donald Trump made caricatures of people who attacked him. Marco Rubio attacked him. He said, dude, you're wearing high heels, right? Because the guy had like boots that were this big. Jeb Bush, you're low energy, right? Chris Christie would come after him. Oh, Chris, you're not even taking you seriously. So all these people are coming after Donald Trump, and he just pushing him off and literally makes fun of him. And everybody agrees and they laugh because he's actually just one of those guys that if you try to punch me, not only am I going to knock you out, but like I'm going to show people that your punch didn't even affect me. Well, Ron DeSantis is the first time he has gone out and just outright attacked someone who wasn't attacking him.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only reason you've seen a substantial shift in the polls. So you have Iowa, New Hampshire, Florida, Texas, all of South Carolina, all have had polls in the last couple of days that have shown Ron DeSantis beating Donald Trump in a Republican primary of only Republican voters. So in the last week, he's lost about 1 in 4 Trump voters. Now, he probably will see a bump tonight when he announces for president.
Yeah.
I like Donald Trump. I really like Ron DeSantis. I think both of these guys are amazing. I think if Trump continues to attack DeSantis, it's only going to make DeSantis stronger. The same way when all those people lined up and started attacking Trump, it made him stronger. So it's really going to come down to how he handles the next couple weeks. I think we'll find out. The establishment, too, is going to have to decide whether they just back DeSantis because they hate Trump so much, or are they actually going to get behind a Mike Pompeo, a Mike Pence, a Tim Scott, a Nikki Haley? If they do that, it's going to also be very interesting because that will give DeSantis less of a coalition, less of the coalition he needs to actually beat Donald Trump. So those are some of the things I'm looking at. I don't know if that makes any sense.
75 million voters, Luke, say they're still there for him. And we'll see. There's just going to be bloodshed on this one, political bloodshed on this one.
Yep.
But, okay, so there you have it, folks. Luke Macias, that's his podcast. Go out there. When are you every Tuesday as well? Is
every
that correct?
Tuesday morning. Yeah, every Tuesday morning. So we record on Mondays and we release Tuesday morning.
Okay, listen, I want to thank you for coming on board. It's 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Go see if Trump is the same guy he was before. Luke, have a wonderful night. God bless you. And thank you for being here. And we'll
be talking during the session. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you very much. Okay. All right, folks, that's it. Have a good night. God bless you. It's Tuesday. We're here at 8 o'clock next time around. God bless everybody. Trump's out there on the loose again. Let's see what happens. Stay positive. It's all going to be just fine.